All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the District of Sechelt Planning and Community Development Committee meeting for January 24th. Before we begin this meeting, it's customary we'll start with a call to order and a declaration of conflict. So if there are any councillors here that wish to declare a conflict on any of the items on today's agenda, looking left and right, seeing none, we will now move on to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any amendments, additions, deletions from staff at this point? Seeing none, have a councillor move the agenda. Seegers and Lutz, first and second. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have no appointments and delegations today, so we'll move right on to committee and commission minutes and reports. Item 4.1, minutes of the Planning Community Development meeting of December 20th. For receipt. Moved and seconded. All right. Any discussion of those minutes or any items to be pulled up? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. So item 4.2, minutes of Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting, December 6th. Have somebody move receipt? Moved and seconded. Seegers and Shanks. Any amendments? Okay. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 10 and 11, it indicates a list of priorities from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Doesn't have a date on here though. I'm just wondering, and they've got, you know, progress that is, you know, happened or not on all of these. So I'm wondering, is this the 2018 list of priorities they're looking to bring forward? Is this an old list that they're just updating? I'm looking for some input on that.
Well, I'm not seeing the chair in the gallery.
Okay.
So it's an ongoing list. That's what I recalled from the meeting.
Okay. And then on page 12, under the right-hand signs on the highway at Brookman, there's an incomplete sentence there. I'm just wondering if that's something that we need to clarify for staff.
Right. Yes, we. So with these minutes, we get them, I believe, still before they get them. The chair gets them to amend them. I think that's still the case. And if I recall this, the discussion that was had was about these signs being too far in towards the highway, so it being somewhat of a hazard. I'm not sure how to amend that at this
Hazard
point.
for pedestrians?
A pedestrian hazard.
Okay.
So maybe we can just add that in.
So causing a hazard for pedestrians?
Yeah. So if we could make that amendment, that would be a little bit more correct.
And then staff can actually take that and action it. Thank you.
Okay, so the minutes as amended. All those in favor? And it's carried. Okay, moving on to item 4.3, which is the minutes of the ICSP Advisory Committee of December 13th for receipt. Moved and seconded, Seegers and Lutz. Any items to discuss there, amendments to be made? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I just noticed in the attendance, we've got Angela Letman as present and as staff. So probably want to take her out of the group of them present and just leave her under the staff heading. That's it. Thank you.
And staff. With I'm not seeing anyone here to ask that question. Sometimes we will record them in different ways depending on, but I don't think that she is actually a member of that committee. So yeah, removing it from the present list may be what we're looking for. So you making that amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amended version? And that's carried. Okay. Moving on to item 4.4, minutes of the Advisory Planning Commission meeting for receipt. Moved and seconded, Seegers and Lutz. Any amendments to be made at this point? I think no. Everybody's comfortable with those. Okay. All those in favor? And that's carried. So we have no items of new business, but we do have 3 business items. First one being item 6.1, the High Point Development Permit. Report by the community planner. We'll have somebody remove receipt. Councillor Seegers and Shanks. All those in favor? And that carries. Mr. Aaron Thompson, community planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a brief presentation of this development permit. This is a development permit for the High Point Apartments from 345363 BC Limited. And I'm not sure. Oh, okay, there, I got it. So here you can see the location. Here's Trail Avenue, and you can see the proposed site here. You can see Medusa, Dolphin down there. So it's located on this kind of large parcel here with the BC Hydro right-of-way running through it. And then here's kind of a little bit more detail, the portion of that site that's being developed. So you have this is the remainder parcel, and these are the previous 5 phases of the other older strata that were developed between the 90s and 2000s, I believe. So a bit of the background of the property: its zoning is R4 with an OCP designation and multifamily mixed residential, and it falls within development permit area 7 for multiple family residential. There are some encumbrances on the property, an easement for access over the existing strata, and statutory rights of way for the BC Hydro and transmission line and terracing gas. So what this proposal is for is a 36-unit apartment building with the associated landscaping and parking areas. So I'll go through some of the site drawings. So here's the overall site plan that you can see. So this is on that remainder portion here. And you can see the building in this T shape here, as well as some of the parking area located more towards the BC Hydro right away. Here are the elevations. So the top here is the west elevation. So looking from the west. So here from these other multifamily residential properties. And here is the north elevation for if you're looking from the BC Hydro right away, what you'd see here. Then the east elevation. So this would be kind of what you'd be looking at from the internal strata road when you're going through to this property. And the south elevation looking again kind of from the internal road network that you would see for this development. So we have a few renderings that kind of show you what this would look like in 3D and in color. So we'll just go through it. Again, it's kind of the partial bird's eye view. And then we have a landscaping plan. So this is the overall plan, and there's some more details later. But you can see here there's a kind of a outdoor public amenity area. You see some of the landscaping along the buildings here for like the private kind of patio exits as well. The various trees, some hedging and buffering along this property line that is adjacent to this other residential property. And then you can see landscaping within the BC Hydro right away, which has some restrictions to it. So a lot of it is grass, but there's some kind of islands of more landscaping, as well as landscaped islands breaking up some of the parking area. And here are some of the more details of it. And you can see here, you can see the little islands of more intensive landscaping, as well as a gravel pathway that kind of goes to the BC Hydro right away. And on the south side here, you can see in more detail the amenity area. I can't quite remember the word, but it's like a pagoda kind of structure here, terrace, in that little amenity area. So one of the first issues I did want to bring up with this property is, and highlighted in my report, is a bit of a unique situation where we have a property that was created that was originally part of an older strata, the strata surrounding it, but has since been severed. And when it was severed off, no direct access was given to a public right-of-way. which creates kind of a unique situation for access and how our bylaws are interpreted. So one of my first thoughts was to, of course, ask council on the interpretation of their bylaw in regards to front, rear, and side yard setbacks. So I do kind of highlight this in my report, but essentially within our definitions, a front yard setback is a front lot line is the lot line with the shortest highway frontage. And if there are no highway frontage, how can you have a front lot line? And then a rear lot line is based off of the front lot line. So if you can't have a front lot line, you can't have a rear lot line, which then leads the other definition for a side lot line is any other lot line. So in terms of the pure definitions, it would appear that all the lot lines of this property are side lot lines. However, there is also an aspect to look at in terms of the form and character of the surrounding neighborhood and what's been done previously. So you can, if I go back to one of the site plans, you can see how the previous strata was developed and how there was a rear lot line towards the east property line, and the front was considered along the east property line along Trail Avenue. So you can see that here. And that's kind of how these all developed previously. So the real main difference that this kind of would look is that this is a shorter distance than what would be if it was one of these buildings. So that's kind of the impact of the proposed change, and that would have an effect of the layout of this development. So yeah, that is kind of one of the things I'm asking council to consider through my report and in the recommendations of how to interpret that. Then other than that, this proposal meets the majority of our development permit guidelines. It meets 92% of the applicable guidelines. And it just has some of the slight limitations due to the large portion of the property that is taken up by the BC Hydro right away. It's hard it can't be developed in that area, so it lends itself to being used as a parking area towards the side when, ideally it's not. And some of the issues around that. Yeah. And then as well, the addition of some of the other, in my recommendations, I'm recommending some additional conditions as they are harder to show on some of the plans, such as, including the dark sky friendly lighting, openable windows, and best management practices for stormwater management. So my recommendation is that council consider all the lot lines to be side lot lines, and that the development permit be approved for the property, subject to that it's being developed in accordance with the drawings I presented and are attached to the report, including the architectural and landscaping drawings. That we receive a landscaping bond to cover to secure the landscaping. That the light fixtures are downcast and energy efficient. That all the dwelling unit windows be openable, and that there be no net increase to stormwater flow or velocity, and that they use best management practices to achieve that, and that all the runoff from the parking areas be directed to oil and grit separator. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right. Do we have any questions from council on the committee on the report? Councilor Seegers.
Thank you. What would be the impact on the development if the one lot line was considered a rear lot line?
It would. There are two options I've presented. Also, if council does consider that to be a rear lot line, there could be a variance granted for this specific case, and then there would be go through that public process with the variance and ask the public if there is any issue with that. It would be a variance from, I believe it's 7.5 meters down to approximately 4 meters. So that's the kind of the scope of the variance that we'd be looking for there. The other option would, of course, be asking the applicant to redesign to meet within the existing zoning setbacks requirements, if the council considered that to be a rear lot line.
Okay, so if we were to accept it as a side lot line, where would the community actually give us input? At what process through this?
Yeah, they could give input at this point through the development permit process, but it's just a matter of interpretation at this point, and so it's kind of up to council at that point how they want to interpret their bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Just a further point on that, some of these setbacks are based on building code requirements, so do we have a firm handle on that type of thing, the distance to combustibles and that?
Yeah, the building department had no issue or made any comments on that. So, and if they are specific material requirements, the building department should comment on that. So,
Okay, thanks, I just wanted to be clear. Okay, Councillor Lutz, I believe you have something?
Thank you. Can you explain where the fire access would be on the east side?
on the east side, I don't believe there's a fire access on the east side. Let me just look at the floor plan here. The individual units on the east side would have outdoor access to their patio, but there's no entrance on the east side. Oh, yeah, there isn't. So, yeah.
So fire trucks, how would they deal with an issue down that side of the building? Would it just be the sprinkler system?
Well, there'd be the sprinkler system, and they'd have access on the other three sides of the building. They'd be able to get a truck around those sides.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would meet their requirements within 75 meters of a fire hydrant. So.
Thanks.
Just as a follow-up on that, was this referred at all to the fire department for comment?
Yeah.
And they raised no issues?
They just stated, I believe they stated that it has to meet the building code standards, which is 6 meter wide access route, sprinkling, and the certain level of clearance, which there's nothing that would impede the clearance, so that's fine.
Finished? Okay. Councillor Seegers for another comment.
Thank you. On the fire department response, they don't actually indicate sprinklers specifically, which I've seen them do in some of the others. I did notice in the plans that it indicated that the building will be sprinklered. Is that why they didn't respond that way?
Perhaps. I'm not quite sure why the fire department would or not. But I understand from the building code they are required to, so maybe that is why not.
Yeah, I think that statement about the building code would cover that.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything else in here. I think that was all I had. That's all I've got. Thank you.
So I had, for myself, some questions about the history on this one. I think last time that we saw this, it was to deal with the encumbrances on the road, and it was to potentially deal with a right-of-way through district property. And that I'm not seeing that really dealt with in any large degree. So, if memory serves me correctly, it was a discussion of a development permit that we had that discussion, and that was before your time. When you did your research, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that history as it applies to this, or if it doesn't, let us know.
That was a discussion that did come up. There is an existing easement that has been in place for access, and working with the previous director of planning, at that time we were looking at just utilizing that easement, as it didn't require a bigger public process that we would have to do for the disposition of public lands by giving access over the district right away, as well as it wouldn't require negotiations with the existing strata. My understanding is that the applicant did, though, work on those negotiations with the existing strata, but in the end, utilizing the existing easement would be a much simpler way.
So as it stands, though, in the maps that I've seen, they're talking about the access coming through the strata, and that's.
Yeah. Sorry, I think it was in the first drawing, so I have to scroll back quite a bit. You can. Like Caleb, maybe you can just, instead of me scrolling through 20 slides, go to the first one. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So here, it might not be the clearest, but you can see this green dotted line. That is the easement that's granting access, and the previous plan, I believe, was to have an right away through here that would cross over this lot 50 here, which is district-owned land. So that's kind of where it is. But there's the existing access that's been in place for a number of years. So.
Okay, and then all the issues around that have been sorted out, to our knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I believe I'm going to go to Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, just one question. This is a piece of property that is now separated from the original strata phases.
Correct.
Is it in fact going to be condominiums or is it apartment rentals?
I'm not 100% sure what the plans of the applicants are. It could be either. Yeah, they are in the audience if you'd like to ask them, but it could be stratified or not.
Yeah. Just a question.
Yeah.
If it's to be apartment rentals or it's to be stratified at this point.
We've learned over years not to get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
We've started this in 2005, actually
Right.
prior to 2005.
Right.
Here it's 2018 and we still don't have anything, so we want to have something definite first. But the original intent was not for rent, they were going to be sold off.
Okay.
That was the original intent.
Okay. No.
Now with the rental situation the way it is, who knows?
That's right. Okay.
You know.
Okay. Thanks very much for the answer.
So, okay. So I'm not seeing any more from committee on that. This is a bit of a different, in some ways different, but very similar to some of the others that we've dealt with in downtown Sechelt since we've been here. So let's start to work our way through the recommendations then. And I think with this one here that we'll just deal with two in its entirety unless committee wants to do. Moved by Councillor Seegers.
Yep. Second.
Second by Councillor Shanks. Any discussion at this point? Nope. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? And that receives committee approval. So that item's been dealt with. Moving on. Item 6.2, Van Key Developments for Development Permit, report by the community planner. Have somebody move receipt? Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks, and our community planner. Sorry.
Okay, is that working? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. So this is an application for a development permit. And there's also an application in for a 14-lot subdivision. So the development permit, the application for the subdivision needs to meet the development permit area guidelines for number 4 and 5. I'll describe those to see if the site is suitable for its intended use. So the location of the proposed development is in the West Porpoise Bay neighborhood, adjacent to, well, it's got Kinnickinnick Park at the south and rural area kind of to the west and some residential development to the east. There's kind of what it looks like from the road, the lot gently, but it's actually fairly steeply sloped up, varying from 20 to 30% grades. This is a picture looking from the top of the site down towards Porpoise Seashell Inlet. So it's treed but has been cleared in the past. And that's looking towards Kinnickinnick Park and Heritage Road, kind of near the top of the site. So you can just see that there are some trees on the site. The zoning is R1B, so residential, and it can allow subdivision down to 900 square meters of parcel size. and then the R1, it's sort of a transition between the rural and the smaller lots in the other residential area. The official community plan land use designations are for residential on the lot, and you can see the rural residential to the west and Kinnickinnick Park down to the south. So it's in line with the land use designation. The neighborhood policy for West Porpoise Bay, I'm sure is the one that seemed applicable to this development is that new developments are to fit with the natural site contours, minimize tree and vegetation loss, and minimize disturbance to slopes. So that's kind of what we're measuring it against as well, and primarily the development permit areas. So you can see the kind of red and purpley area up here is development permit area number 4 for rocky beachfront escarpments and slope hazards. And then development permit area 5 is the colored areas. So we had the dark green, or the green is greater than 30% slopes, and the brown kind of areas are greater than 20%. So this application needed to primarily show that the geotechnical stability of the site was suitable for the subdivision into residential. The purpose of the development permit areas, as stated in the OCP, is to protect development from hazardous conditions, to minimize the impact of development on steeply sloped lands and natural features, and to support low impact and innovative development approaches to minimize long-term infrastructure maintenance costs on steeply sloped lands. The proposal, you probably can't see this too well, but there's 14 lots, and there's a through road from Gale Avenue North up to the end of the developed portion of Heritage Road, where it kind of ends by Kinnickinnick Park. So yeah, there would be 1, 2, 3 lots there, and the road kind of climbs a grade not to exceed 15%, which is our bylaw 430 requirements. And then the remaining lots follow along this slope. And we've worked with the applicant to ensure that the building sites will be, but this will come at a later stage, but the pre-design stage is they're identifying the building sites close to the road, but not in the substantially out of the cut and fill areas that are going to be required for the road. And then the steeply sloped areas down below will probably not be developed on, but that will come later at the more detailed design stages. So primarily the geotechnical report was what we needed to consider is a major component of this development permit area for number 4 and 5. So the report does state, from a geotechnical viewpoint, the subject site is considered suitable for a development of the type proposed and safe for the use intended, provided the following recommendations are incorporated into the design and construction. So under each of those headings for excavation, all the way down to foundation design, slope stability considerations, the utilities, and the additional subsurface investigations before the building of retaining walls and that sort of thing. So those are all laid out with what the geotechnical engineer recommends be done. So staff has looked at the application and weighed it against the development permit area guidelines, and I've determined that it substantially meets all the requirements at the pre-design stage. So I'm recommending that the development permit be issued with conditions to include, prior to the issuance of the permit, a tree protection plan that considers the development permit area number 5 guidelines, which are they're in the report. I didn't spell them out again on here. That a revegetation and landscaping plan and tree cutting permit required by our environmental management bylaw be provided, and that a landscaping bond also be provided prior to any construction, well, before the development permit's issued. Then, as conditions of the actual development permit, that all works are to adhere to the drawings they submitted and the geotechnical recommendations. The geotechnical engineer also provided on the last page of the report a sort of a letter of assurance that they've read the development guidelines, the development permit guidelines, and that they will adhere to all those through the development stages. That the applicant provide detailed drawings and plans for the through road, the associated retaining walls for that through road, lot grading or retaining walls for individual lots, that they provide detailed plans for lot grading for the subdivision, but also for the individual lots, that they define safe building sites and stormwater management for the subdivision and for the individual lots that meet the requirements of our bylaw 430. And so that's all listed. There's a 5-meter statutory right-of-way for stormwater that will be required along the eastern sort of bottom edge of the site. And that also requires a bit of geotechnical and engineering design work. And that fire hydrants, these are all kind of to meet the wildfire prevention measures of the development permit area guidelines, that a fire hydrant be provided close to Kinnickinnic Park. And then those would be conditions of the development permit. And then the final one is that covenants be registered on title for the newly created lots that will cover the various topics of protected trees, and landscaping to protect from slope hazards, that garages are set back from the street, which is another DP guideline, and that specific wildfire prevention measures for the 2 lots closest to the forested area of Kinnickinnic Park be included, and so that those don't get lost by the time we get to the building stage, if it gets approved. And I think, yeah, there was one final, yeah, and that would be to the satisfaction of the District of Sechelt. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Look to committee, see if there's any questions. I'm not seeing any other than yourself. Okay, Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 74, VI, so it'd be 6. Garage faces must be built 1 meter back from the front of the building. Is that from the front of the lot or from the building?
That is a guideline in our development permit, and we're suggesting that it be built to meet that guideline. So, yeah, 1 meter back from the front of the building was a way of achieving that the garages aren't the prominent feature that's seen from the road as you're traveling up it.
Okay, so it wasn't just the front of the lot, it was from the building.
Yeah,
okay.
and that's a form and character kind of requirement.
Okay, I did read the engineering report by Kerwood Liddell.
Horizon Engineering.
Yes, Horizon, right, Dress 2.
Yes.
Yes, and what I noticed was that every one of the site holes that they drilled, they found it was wet. So that's I mean, we do know we have issues in that area with water, just down the road. So it's indicating that we have to be very careful how things are built in here. We can't go in, we can't clear the lots, we can't, you can't go in and start digging things because we're going to have water issues. So how are we going to ensure that this is built as described.
Yeah, so that's where each of the conditions that we're suggesting in the development permit is that they provide the detailed plans and meet the requirements of the geotechnical report, which does prior to groundbreaking or land clearing, and the letter and the report do address that. I think there are recommendations in the report that talk about once the cuts are made in the initial stages, that a review be done in the field. So when we get those plans in the detailed design, staff will ensure as we go through that those geotechnical recommendations are being met as we go through. That's the best I can answer for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too am concerned about the geotech. When they talk about till-like soils, is that by any chance quadra sand?
I would have to go back to the report and see what the geotechnical assessment had in there.
Usually tills are not sand, they're more clay-based and they're glacial deposits. So they have a little more to them than usually.
They were, yeah, I believe the report did state what kind of soils it was. I'm trying to see what page that could have been on. I don't have the right page numbers on the agenda. Is this it? Yeah. The groundwater conditions, that part, or the till-like soils? Yeah. Well, all I can say is that these engineers have to follow, their professional associations and the ethics and guidelines that come with that. So we rely on their signed and sealed stamp when they review these. And I think to ensure that the stages are done, as conditions of the development permit, we would have to make sure that, those checks are done as we're accepting their plans.
Is that?
I also, if I can just add, I also did ask the geotechnical engineer when I met with her about the water and all those conditions, and she answered confidently that from what they've seen on that site, it's suitable for this, with the qualification that once they start making first digging for the road and going deeper, that they will be assessing those situations.
I had a question about the process here. So this is one of those things where we're doing a development permit that's attached to the zoning. And
Attached to a subdivision, to the zoning. Sorry.
I thought it was at third reading and then the development permit hinging unacceptable development permit. Is that not the case?
There's no rezoning associated with this application. It was rezoned back in 2006, just half of the lot. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for reminding me.
Okay.
My question was about the completeness of this application, because sometimes we would expect to see a lot of this stuff quite well defined, and I'm just curious if we have enough definition, in staff's opinion, to go ahead with this.
I think the level of detail will come would come as we go through. I feel confident enough that they've given the background required at this stage, with the caveat that as we're going through, if some problem is encountered, we would have to then reassess based on the recommendations of the qualified professionals involved.
Right. And we're going to have an appropriate mechanism to do that at a later date, is what you're saying?
Well, the conditions are written to meet our bylaw requirements or to the satisfaction of, for a bylaw 430, and that's mostly for the subdivision setup. The individual lots, when they get constructed, would also have the building permit requirements, and a geotechnical report for each lot would have to be done, and a development permit, number 5, would also have to be applied for when each lot is at the stage of building a home. So anything that didn't get picked up for the subdivision stage would presumably get picked up at that stage.
Okay. Anything else from committee on that? Just 1 minute, please. I just wanted to check one more thing before we move ahead on this. It's important that we get all of these questions asked here because, of course, there's a lot riding on it. So, flow of the meeting, less important than getting it right at this point. 1 minute.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, cool.
If you
Please.
have any more detailed technical questions, the engineer for Kerwood Lydell, that's the applicant, or the agent for the applicant, is in the audience. So
Sure. We may. Sure. Councillor Seegers with further water question.
I'd like to ask the engineer. I haven't asked the question yet. So my concern on this site is water, and the fact that if they don't follow the plan, so they clear cut the lot, they go in, they start cutting, we could potentially have a huge situation on our hands with this site. So how do we deal with that? Okay, do you want to come to the mic, please?
Welcome. Thank you very much
Do
indeed.
you want to state your name as well?
My name is Jurek Janotabzowski from Kerwood Lydell Associates. You can call me Jurek quite happily. I wanted to go back to an earlier question by Councillor Lutz about whether this is quadrasand, and she's noticed till, and also the question of water by yourself, Councillor Seegers. And till is generally considered to be a well cemented, quite hard material, which is what you'd normally find anywhere on the coast. Dig 3 feet down, and that's what you'll find. It's also usually a limiting layer in terms of groundwater flow. So if it doesn't behave in the same way as you would have in sands, where you actually have an aquifer that follows the groundwater table up to the surface. By being a limiting layer, what you are likely seeing is a layer of water that cannot get through the till. So it's a very thin sheet of water that's moving off the site. This site is really quite different than anything that you'd see further north, which is very sandy. And what you're seeing on the north side, further up Gale Avenue, is that you have high ridge lines of hillsides, and you have a concave situation where all the water is draining towards a point, and the groundwater table there is creates the problems that I'm sure that you're sort of thinking about. Our site is convex in nature. So in actual fact, if you were to look at the site visually, it's actually moving away to the sides. So any penetration of the underlying soils are much easier to control. And those are just things that we would need to do, which is part of the normal process. We would have to have, well, in fact, we will have a soil erosion control plan. We'll have a stormwater management plan with lots of details. And so, and this is relatively, a standard approach to this kind of work. Have I answered your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if I could just go back, thank you for addressing us. Yeah. I just pulled out the development action chart, if we could do that. And I'm just would direct staff to page 115 and 113. So we have a Van Key development there under subdivision without PLA, and we have a Van Key there for development permit. So, and I'm not seeing development permit. So, is there any additional changes to this, or is this an up-to-date development action chart? And this just goes back to my previous question about the development permit going together with a subdivision.
The action chart is accurate, and there is the subdivision application as well as the development permit application, but there's no rezoning application associated with that, if that was the question.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I was thinking of that, but I used the wrong word.
Oh, okay.
And so that goes back to my question about the definition, because we were waiting to see a lot layout, and some of that stuff is now, again, getting kicked down the road on the development permit in terms of the drawings and the finalization of that. So when we last saw this, I had a similar question, and I'm just curious if we're comfortable with the level of detail at this point provided in this application.
Yeah, I'm not aware when this would have been before council before. The rezoning was done in 2006, and I believe this is the first report that's come forward regarding this property. There's been other the Van Key Development Incorporated has another application with us for another property related to another subdivision.
So maybe that's why I'm getting confused,
Yeah.
because it's the same name and it's in a similar neighborhood.
That one's in Selma Park. What this one is in.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, I am getting my lines crossed then, but if staff is comfortable with it, then I am as well. So, moving recommendation 2.
Yes. There's
Okay.
a 2 and a 2.
Just let me get back to the cover page here.
Recommendation 2 and 3, I guess. 2 and 3.
I'll second that.
So recommendations 2 and 3, moved by Councillor Seeger, seconded by Councillor Lutz, and recommendation 2 has 3 parts to it, just in case anybody's confused like I am. And okay, so is there any further discussions or questions from committee at this point? Everybody's aware of what they've heard? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. So thank you for that. And then item 6.3 is again our development action chart, I assume just simply for receipt. So if somebody move receipt. Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? Okay, were there any questions about this chart? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Page 111. I'm just wondering who is responsible for updating this and how frequently it gets looked at. And the reason I'm asking is on page 111, it says Chapman Creek Holdings. Date of last action, March 22nd, 17. And we know that other stuff has happened since then. So I'm just questioning how and when it's updated.
Chapman Creek Holdings. March 22nd, second and third reading of bylaw. So when we last saw that, then that was,
A few weeks back.
yeah, but I'm not sure it was to do with the rezoning. Staff to comment? Mr. Thompson?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, this was prepared last Wednesday before council saw the report. So it was unsure what action council would take at that point. So that's why it hasn't been updated since then. So.
So when we next see
That's
it,
all I
we'll
have.
have that
Thank you.
amendment. It's on
Yeah.
every single agenda, so it's,
Okay.
Yeah, typically it would be done the Wednesday before the planning committee would be updated. So.
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Are there any others anybody wanted to ask about? Councillor Shanks.
A couple here that we've dealt with some time ago, and I'm surprised there's no further action. On page number 111, Spani Developments and the Clayton Family Lands, in terms of their specific projects. And I would think that there's some deadlines arising for those two developments, but I'm not sure. And then the third one, can't find it now. Prime Signal development on the corner of Trail and Cowrie Street. We still seem to be awaiting on some of these for completion of some kind. Any comments of those three specifically?
Prime Signal, again, waiting on the applicant to decide if he will wish to proceed or not with this project. I believe he was estimating the costs and he wasn't sure if it was a viable project anymore. But I have yet to hear anything further on that, as well as based on the traffic impact study as well, that you're looking at those servicing levels. I'm unsure if I am not sure of any updates with with the Spain development project. There again with the traffic impact study and fulfilling those conditions of adoption, it's in the applicant's kind of court on how to meet those. As well, was it all the Clayton applications you had a question for, or specific?
No, well, just the Westbrook, I guess, for the
Okay.
Claytons, yeah. I'm just surprised, I'm not sure of the deadline for applying under the old DCCs and
Yeah.
in view of the Chapman Creek Holdings.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
February
That's why I'm
1st.
surprised. That's why I'm surprised that they haven't come forward at this point in time.
Yeah.
You know, could be huge savings to them. So,
Yeah.
anyway. Thank you.
Any other questions about any information we're seeing on this chart? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Seegers and Lutz, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, public question and answer period.